right, I've got 75% of my voice back. Prednisone is a wonderful thing. I want to begin with the news that's coming out of Riyadh, where Secretary of State Rubio, National Security Advisor Michael Waltz have been meeting with senior Ukrainian officials this morning. This is the first 3 minutes of the presser they conducted after those meetings broke up. Cut number 8.
One interest is ending this war once and for all. Today we made an offer that the Ukrainians have accepted, which is to enter into a ceasefire and into immediate negotiations to end this conflict in a way that's enduring and sustainable and accounts for their interests, their security, their ability to prosper as a nation. I want to personally we both want to thank the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, His Majesty, for hosting us, for making this possible. They've been instrumental in this process, and we're very grateful to them for hosting us here today. And hopefully we'll take this offer now to the Russians. And we hope that they'll say yes, to peace. The ball is now in their court. And but again, the president's objective here is, number one, above everything else, he wants the war to end. And I think today Ukraine has taken a concrete step in that regard. We hope the Russians will reciprocate.
Well, just to add to the Secretary's comments, the Ukrainian delegation today made something very clear, that they share President Trump's vision for peace. They share his determination to end the fighting, to end the killing, to end the tragic kind of meat grinder of people and national treasure that's happening on the front in Ukraine. Number one. Number two, they made concrete steps and concrete proposals, not only accepting our proposal for a full ceasefire, which you can see the details of which are in our joint statement that we released together. But we also got into substantive details on how this war is going to permanently end, what type of guarantees they're going to have for their long-term security and prosperity, but also really looking at what it's going to take to finally end this, the horrific fighting. The other piece that I just want to make very clear is President Trump started this diplomatic effort in the Oval Office, talking to both leaders, both President Putin and President Zelensky back to back. And now that shuttle diplomacy continues. We have a named delegation in terms of next steps from the Russian side. We have a named delegation in terms of next steps from the Ukrainian side. I will talk to my Russian counterpart in the coming days. Secretary Rubio will be with G7 foreign ministers in the next couple of days. We have the NATO Secretary General in the White House on Thursday, and we'll take the process forward from there. So, as a result of that, and I think as a result of this positive step forward, the president has decided to lift the pause on aid and on our security assistance to Ukraine going forward, and that's effective.
So that is all very good. That's all good news. Not a ceasefire until there's a ceasefire, but it's a step towards it. I began my morning on Fox News with Bill Hemmer and Dana Perino this morning on the American Newsroom, cut number 12.
I want to bring in Hugh Hewitt, who is gracious enough to join us this morning to help us sort it all out. How do you think about this, as this has really ratcheted up in the last hour even?
Well, yeah, I was reading the Toronto Premier's comments last night, and I thought that's not the way to deal with President Trump. If you punch him, he punches back hard. He did so this morning. So that was imminently predictable. And I don't think Canada can beat the United States in a trade war, no matter how much electricity they send to New York. So Mr. Ford might want to find a way to back out of the room quietly and quickly.
Hugh, what is your take on, I guess, the financial damage over 2 days? I mean, you're looking at this now. You know, technology took it really on the chin yesterday, and now the other companies are taking it today with the Dow down more than 500 points.
You know, I do not pay much attention to day-to-day markets. I do want to see the budget reconciliation with the permanent taxes cuts extended to rally the markets back. Tariffs are unsettling. The Democrats threatened to shutting down the Democrat unsettled, as Dana mentioned in the last segment. And I think what we're going to see is that the markets will rebound once the Congress gets its act together and gets the Trump agenda passed.
Hugh, let's talk about the arrest of Khalil Mahmoud Khalil at Columbia University. I think it's a very interesting case, and Carrie Urban was on with us earlier. She'd done a lot of research. She helped us understand it. Here's Congresswoman Tlaib reacting to the arrest of Khalil, who was arrested from Columbia University for inciting protests. Watch.
If you believe in constitutional rights, if you understand that they're targeting this person, and everyone knows he has been very vocal against the genocide of the Palestinian people in Gaza, and they're targeting him and refusing him constitutional rights, who's next?
How do you think about this case?
I start with the fact that there are 12 million legal permanent residents in the United States, green card holders, LPRs. He's one of those 12 million. They have a lot of rights, but they are not American citizens. They can be deported. One provisional law, which is 8 U.S.C. 1227, provides that if your presence in the United States does potentially serious damage to our national security, the Secretary of State can make that finding and out you go. Secretary of State Rubio made that finding about Mr. Khalil, and so out he will go. He will get a hearing today, I believe, in the New York Southern District, but I don't find how anyone can overrule the Secretary of State making that particular finding. So not surprisingly, Congresswoman Tlaib is wrong on the law, she's wrong on the facts, and she's wrong on the overall scope of what's going on. President Trump also announced on Truth Social yesterday, this is just the first, and I'm glad it's the first, because LPRs have the most rights of any non-citizen in the United States. So it's a warning shot as well to anyone supporting Hamas. And I don't want to forget to mention, Don Alexander is an American citizen now entering his 17th month of being held hostage by the terrorist organization Hamas. There are other grounds to support the deportation of people depending upon their fact pattern, but the Secretary of State only needs to find that it is reasonably likely that you're causing potentially serious damage to national foreign policy, and I think that's pretty easy to make.
Hugh, the lines are drawn already. Just put this up here. Senate Judiciary Committee, Democrats, free Mahmoud Khalil. Do we have the Speaker Johnson soundbite, guys? Okay. So a moment ago, Speaker of the House, you may have been watching it. He commented on Khalil's matter. Watch here.
This madness has to stop. We have to get control of it. This guy apparently was a mastermind of those very things, when the gnashing of teeth and the ripping of clothes and the people screaming at me, wanting to rip me limb from limb because I was there talking about moral clarity and how there's a right and a wrong. If you are on a student visa and you're in America and you're an aspiring young terrorist who wants to prey upon your Jewish classmates, you're going home.
Okay, so Hugh, the hearing's tomorrow. I don't know what the judge does. You got a First Amendment argument out there on behalf of some. And yesterday we had a guest on from Colombia. We wanted to know what terrorist activities he did threaten. And now, it's one thing to lead the charge. It's another thing to put out the threats. And have we seen that threat in writing that he espoused while being a postgraduate?
I have not,
student?
Bill, but I don't think you need to. I don't think you need to see it. This is why I think they've begun with Mr. Khalil. He has the highest level of protection that a non-citizen can have, legal permanent resident, and they have not produced evidence showing that he has made a specific statement of support of Hamas. But he has been involved in the demonstrations at Columbia, and all the Secretary of State has to do under 8 U.S.C. 1227 is find that there is a reasonable chance that he's doing damage to our national security. Now, when Democrats are presented with an 80-20 issue, and that's an 80% issue where Americans agree these demonstrations are bad for America, they're bad for Columbia, they're bad for the students, they run for the 20. And I'm glad that Senate Democrats are rallying around Mr. Khalil, because everyone ought to have moral clarity on this. And when Columbia loses their $400 million for good, and then Harvard's going to get whacked, I hope, today, and Leo Terrell, who's running the task force at DOJ, moves methodically through every university that is not protected their Jewish students for the last 17 months. They're all going to lose their money, and everyone's going to start taking it seriously. And I hope the Democrats continue to say, we're with the demonstrators.
So, Hugh, just so you know, and this is like breaking news here in New York, we've been told about a rally that'll happen this afternoon at 2 o'clock. It's down in Greenwich Village, Washington Square Park. That's where the liberals gather, and this will be a pro-Palestinian march. And this case is going to be at the core of it. So, as I mentioned, the battle lines are drawn quite clearly already. Thank you.
I like how Bill Hemmer has to describe where the liberals hang out in Manhattan, as if they aren't like
Well, the thing that's important about this, if I could defend myself, this is the spot where you gather for any protest that emanates out of New York. So we will watch it and see what comes of it.
All right.
Good.
Thank you, Hugh.
Okay.
Right. We're going to have to send Harley to look for some live webcam from Washington Square. Maybe we'll find a 90-year-old Bob Dylan singing, strumming oh so softly, whatever his guitar is playing these days. Last week I was on vacation, and I don't normally work on vacation, but I heard about Ari Parker, who is the co-founder of Chapter Medicare, who joins me now, and I wanted to connect with him, so we did. Ari, I just pulled out of my wallet 7 cards, all of which have something to do with my Medicare policy. And that's because I've changed 3 times in 3 years, and I never know which one is legal. So I don't throw anything away. And then you tell me that I am not unusual, that actually I'm a pretty good lawyer. I was an administrative lawyer, general counsel of 2 federal agencies. I found this to be a nightmare because it's a big data problem, and I don't know big data. And you've got it figured out. So tell people about Chapter Medicare and why you and I are going to work together.
Thank you so much for having me on, Hugh. It's a delight to be with you and your audience today. Chapter is the only independent, unbiased Medicare advisory. Let me tell you why. We evaluate all your plan options. There's over 24,000 options nationwide, if you can believe that. That's why you have 7 different cards that you just pulled out. And we help people with no charge and no strings attached. Now, if I may, the inspiration for Chapter came from helping our parents. My mom got laid off during the pandemic. She needed help transitioning to Medicare. You can order a pizza on your phone in 3 minutes, but starting Medicare involves dozens of phone calls and piles of paperwork. As you mentioned, it's a nightmare. And there's 11,000 Americans turning 65 every day. They're bombarded by confusing mailers, unsolicited calls, and Joe Namath commercials. So Chapter is here to help people cut through the nightmare.
Now, what you and I talked about is I realized pretty quickly that depending on what zip code you were in, what plan you wanted, what drugs you used, if you used drugs, if your doctor was in a program that was in or out, it's a big data problem, meaning 24,000 plans. I don't know if that includes the drug plans, but there's Part A, Part B, Part D, and Part G. That's what I get. And it's all in a book that makes no sense at all. You've done all that work. And you've, programmed all that data into a set of choices so that people just need to give you data and outspits the preferred benefit, and you can change once a year, correct?
That's exactly correct, but let's personalize this. Being on the wrong plan means you won't be able to access life-saving healthcare when you need it. Not to mention, it can cost tens of thousands of dollars out of pocket. So this has real consequences for your audience, for their health, and for their wealth. And so we take a personalized approach based on our technology platform. We analyze all 24,000 of your options nationwide. You'll have a one-on-one conversation, and we'll go over your 3 Ps. Your 3 Ps are your providers, what doctors do you see, your prescriptions, what medications do you take, and then your priorities, what is important to you. And then we'll find the exact plan that meets your healthcare needs and transform this nightmare into clarity and provide you with peace of mind for you and your family.
Well, I don't get to open season until October. Then I get to really test you. But what do you do with people like me that move around the country? And I mean, 2 or 3 times a year, I move around the country.
Well, Hugh, there's 2 types of additional coverage, and this might surprise people because they assume, well, if I just have Part A and Part B, that is original Medicare, then I have comprehensive health insurance. Not so.
Not so.
You still have a 20% gap under original Medicare, and there's no out-of-pocket maximum on that 20%. 20% of a very large hospital bill is thousands of dollars, and some seniors unfortunately declare medical bankruptcy as a result. So we need to make sure that you're on the right plan for your healthcare needs. And in a 15-minute call with someone, we save our members on average $1,100. You mentioned the fall. The fall is a great time to review your coverage. However, if you have an opportunity to switch your plan, then we might be able to help you now, especially if you're on a Medicare Advantage plan, because right now is the Medicare Advantage open enrollment period, which offers people an opportunity to adjust their Medicare Advantage plan if there's something suboptimal about it.
Now, Ari, again, I think I'm a pretty smart guy. I was just covering the Ukraine-Russia war pretty well. Just went over the Mahmoud Khalil arrest and deportation proceedings. I get most. I still don't understand the difference between supplemental and advantage. I've been doing this for 4 years.
Let's break it down. Picture Medicare as a 3-legged stool, 3 parts to Medicare. There's your hospital benefit. That's Part A. That means you're inpatient. Then there's Part B. That's everything outside the hospital. That's your outpatient
80% of
coverage.
it.
For most Americans, exactly. It covers 80%. You got it. You owe the other 20% out of pocket. Now, there is a monthly charge for Part B. It's $185 per month. The final leg of the stool is Medicare Part D. That's your prescription benefit, your drug coverage. D is in drugs. Now, most Americans need to consider some type of additional coverage to get that 20% and their drugs covered. There's two options here. So though there's hundreds of insurance companies offering thousands of plans, in a one-on-one conversation with Chapter, we'll sort through your two different flavors. And those flavors are Medicare Supplement, which is also known as Medigap. This is the most comprehensive and flexible type of coverage. It's great for travelers like yourself. The second option is Medicare Advantage. Medicare Advantage is a replacement for original Medicare administered by a private insurance company. It typically comes with your drugs included, and it's lower cost than Medicare Supplement, but there are trade-offs to consider, really important ones. And if you go the Medicare Advantage route, then we need to know your doctors, your drugs, and your priorities to make sure that you're on the single best-fitting Medicare Advantage plan.
Now, I'm going to talk to you through the break and put it all over on the YouTube channel as well. But I want to make sure we are on in Pittsburgh, so we have to slow everything way down. Ari, I mean, those people are slow there. So to find you, they go to askchapter.org, or they go to their phone, just any old phone, and they hit the pound sign, and then they put in 250, pound sign 250, and you ask for Chapter Medicare. Did I say that correctly?
Chapter Medicare. We'd love to help your audience.
But I mean, why do you do it that way on the phone? You just hit pound, hashtag pound 250. Why do that instead of a phone number? Do people find that easier?
Yeah, many people do find it easier, in fact, because they're driving while listening to you.
Okay, pound 250, Chapter Medicare. And I'm going to talk with Ari about D and why you get sent from, my maze involved 4 consultants. That's one of the things I like about Ari. You train your guys, right? Not you get one guy with you and you train, or one gal, and you've trained them yourself.
We only hire the best of the best, and then they go through a rigorous training and ramping program with yours truly.
Yeah, because I got to tell you, it's a bell curve and everything, and if you're throwing darts based upon the fact that you don't know anyone and someone said this, or you're going to your parish bulletin, it's not a good way to pick a plan. It really is not. And the guy, that really lovely people, they tend to be older folks. I think they are coming from their job at greeter at Walmart to tell you how to spend the rest of your life in a hospital care situation. It's not what you want. You want to talk to a young data cruncher. And by the way, how long did it set up to set up the program, Ari, to do the data crunch?
Oh, well, the data took a couple years because, as you can imagine, the insurance carriers and government data isn't standardized. It's fragmented. And there was a lot of red tape and stonewalling to cut through in order to build our remarkable system that allows seniors to search and evaluate all 24,000 of their options.
Are you the first mover in this space? Someone figured out all these old people are lost in the woods? Are you the first guy to figure it out?
Yeah, the whole reason we exist too is because of Medicare's broken incentives. Our North Star is we will always match you with the plan that meets your healthcare needs.
I want to cover something you and I covered when we were doing our talk last week. I couldn't figure out, I'm always, as a lawyer, I'm just curious, why is it working this way? And you call one consultant, they send you another consultant says, I don't do drugs anymore. And then you told me Biden changed something with the drug. Who gets paid along the way? How does it work?
This is the whole reason we exist, Hugh. You hit the nail on the head. It's because of the Medicare industry's broken incentive model. We are the only company that has managed to break the status quo and put seniors first by allowing them to evaluate all their options, not just the ones that we earn money from, but all their options.
And so how many people are you signing up on a daily basis? I mean, how are you rolling out?
Well, we've helped tens of thousands of people already, just in the last quarter alone, in fact. And as you mentioned, there's a silver tsunami, so we can't wait to help the 11,000 Americans per day who are turning 65 or coming off their work-provided coverage.
Yeah, and so when Elon looks at this and says, we can save money on Medicare, he's got to be right, right?
Yeah, this isn't a surprise to you and your listeners. but the government isn't great at building user-friendly websites. In fact, we all remember the Obamacare portal's initial launch failures. And so there's a huge opportunity here to improve what Medicare.gov can do. Because right now, if you go to Medicare.gov and you try to sort your Medicare Advantage plan offerings, you can't even find whether your doctor is in or out of network.
Been there, done that. It's the craziest damn thing. They can't do anything, and they've been trying to do it well for 25 years. They can't do it at all. So are you public or are you private?
Private.
And when are you going to go public?
That's a great question. Our CEO testified in front of the Senate Finance Committee on things that we can do in order to improve Medicare, specifically on how the Medicare.gov website itself can be improved. And we can't wait to help seniors navigate this bureaucratic maze and get through the nightmare and find peace and clarity on the other side.
Whenever you do your initial round, call me up. Because when technology meets need, at that intersection, there is wealth. And it's because you're providing a service. And it is the most broken, stupid system that has been built. Pathway evolution is a term of art in the insurance business. Pathway evolution is evident in the chaos that is Medicare. But you're figuring out, Ari, congratulations on that. I look forward to working with you for a long time. Ari Parker is co-founder of Chapter Medicare. Remember, hashtag 250. It's pretty easy. Go to your phone, hashtag 250, ask for Chapter Medicare. Talk to one of their people about whether you're turning 65 now, whether your parents are turning 65 now, whether you've had a change in circumstance, like you're moving from a private plan to retirement, or you got divorced, spouse died. I think that counts, doesn't it, Ari? That's a change in situation that qualifies you for open season?
Well, there's a lot of change in circumstances. So if you've experienced something that is a change, then it's worth speaking to speaking to our team.
Good advice. Ari, thank you. We'll talk again at length. You've done a public service today. I appreciate the time. Be well. Happy to have Congressman Ken Calvert of Riverside, California, join me. Congressman, you do most of the talking because I really haven't got a lot of bandwidth left in those larynx today. Are we going to get the CR passed this week?
Thanks for having me on, Hugh. Yes, we're going to get that passed in about an hour and a half. We're about 4 o'clock or so. We're going to pass this thing.
Well, that is very good news, and it's going to go over to the Senate. Do you think you've got the 60 votes necessary in the Senate to keep the government open for 6 months?
Well, if we don't, then it's going to be the Schumer shutdown. Mr. Schumer, if he wants to shut down, then he won't get the 8 Democrat senators we need to do to get to pass the CR. It's important for the American public.
Yeah, Congressman Massey said he wants no part of it, and I've always had my differences with him. But is every other Republican going along with it? Because I think we need every other Republican in the House.
Yeah, I think so. I'm we may end up passing it by 1 vote, but we don't want to waste any votes around here, I guess.
A win is a win.
Win is a win.
Congressman, what's it do for defense spending for 6 months?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I don't like CRs. I don't think you like CRs. It doesn't give the flexibility to the secretary you would like to have. But we gave a lot of anomalies and transfer authority, a significant transfer authority. We kicked it up to $8 billion to give him maximum flexibility because we're operating a year-long CR. We've never operated the Department of Defense on a year-long CR, but we're going to this time.
Okay, so the plan is to get this done this week, have the government run for 6 months, and then move to the budget and reconciliation process. How close are you guys to the Senate to actually cutting the taxes, building up the defenses, securing the border, opening up our energy resources in America?
A lot of work to do. To make sure that we reconcile our differences between ourselves and the Senate. But I have every confidence we will do so and make sure that we pass a reconciliation bill that we can all be proud of and give President Trump a big win.
Now, you see, I hope your colleagues on the other side are aware of the markets, which are a little bit upset over the last couple of weeks, primarily because of tariffs, but also because they don't know about their tax rates. And so if they did the one big, beautiful bill, we might calm everyone down, get moving forward with exploration and energy production, bring down price, sort of like get to year 3 in the first year of your second term of Trump 1. It took 3 years to get to the perfect economy before COVID. COVID crashed it. I'd like to get there this year, and that would help the sooner we get started with the taxes, I think.
I think you're right. I think one big, beautiful bill, get this tax policy straightened out, and maybe we can then move toward a second reconciliation. And, in reconciliation also, we're adding defense money, which is urgently needed. We'll have anywhere between $100 and $150 billion to assist our defense establishment to make sure we have the capability we need to have.
Now, I like to remind people that Riverside, California is the home of the American nuclear deterrent because Ken Calvert, the guy you see there, he's in charge of getting the Columbia class in the water. And yesterday or last week, Pete X has listed his priorities. He did not mention the Columbia class. Was that an oversight on his part? Please tell me it was just an oversight on his part, Ken Calvert.
Well, I'm sure it is an oversight. That's one of our top priorities is to get the Columbia on track. Is a little behind schedule and over budget, but it's extremely important to replace the Ohio class submarine. I know you love the name Ohio class submarine, but we're
hate to see him go, but they've protected the country for 25 years, 30 years. Time to let them retire and put the new Columbia class in there. And so I'm glad. I just wanted to make sure about that. And that reprogramming you talked about, the 8%. He doesn't want an 8% cut, if I understand it correctly. He wants to move 8% around. Am I right about that?
That's right. We're taking 8% of the Biden priorities and reallocating that to the Trump priorities. And that's going to be something that's near and dear to your heart, more shipbuilding, make sure that we have enough aircraft, to make sure that we have enough ammunition, that we have the missiles and long-range fire that we need. So those are the priorities we're looking at.
Well, I look at more Marines, more sailors, more airmen, and I hate it. My Army buddies don't like saying this. Maybe a smaller ground army. Is that the way it's going, Ken Calvert?
Well, we've shrunk it quite a bit. By the way, we just gave the CR. We're going to give the biggest pay increase in 40 years to our enlisted personnel, E1s, E6.
Bravo.
And, E1 was only making $11 an hour going in, and that isn't sufficient. So we kicked it up to approximately $15. And so it's a big deal with these men and women who are serving our military. Army is a great part of our service, and it will be for a long time. And they have a big part of our national security, and they'll continue to do so.
Well, kudos to you, Chairman Calvert, who runs the Defense Appropriations Subcommittee on House Appropes. Hopefully all you and your colleagues will get that done in a couple of hours, send it over to the Senate, and we won't have a Schumer shutdown. We'll be on to part 2 of the Trump agenda. It's rolling out pretty well. I think pretty well indeed. Ken Calvert, good to see you. Thank you, David M. Drucker. Follow him on Twitter, X, David M. Drucker, senior political writer for the Dispatch. David, I think Republicans will pass the continuing resolution in less than an hour or so. Will it get through the Senate where it needs 60 votes? You are quiet, David. There you are. You're okay now. We turned you on. We got you.
Okay. Listen, Hugh, I think if it gets to the Senate, I think one way or the other, it'll get to 60 votes. Senators have even less patience for government shutdowns than House members do, or maybe I should say they don't have patience for them where sometimes the House does. So if the Republicans can get this thing through, and it would basically be a party line vote with no votes to spare, I think you'll see enough Democrats jump on board with it because they don't like to shut down the government. Senate Republicans don't like to shut down the government. So I think that's one thing that'll get out of the way. Now,
the breaking news is that Premier Ford up in Toronto is going to turn out the lights in New York. He backed off. They've announced they're not going to do that. That in fact, they're going to renegotiate the USMCA. Trump win, right?
Well, we will see. The way Ford, I watched Premier Ford's press conference, and the way he described it was that Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick called him. He described it as an olive branch and said he would negotiate. He didn't make any predictions about how the negotiations would go, but he said when someone offers you an olive branch, the right thing to do is to take it. I coincidentally was on the phone with political operatives up in Canada today, and what they were explaining to me was that they were completely gobsmacked as to why President Trump was coming after among the closest U.S. allies on the planet and one of our biggest, if not the biggest, trading partner that we have. And they're just trying to figure out what to do about it. But the thing that they were explaining to me was they have voters too, and they're not going to roll over and play dead because Trump threatens them. So it'll be interesting to see where all of this ends up if we ever do get to a conclusion.
Well, the answer to them is let our milk come in. All right? I mean, it's really dairy products is what they don't. They're protectionists when it comes to dairy. They love to send us lumber. We like to buy their lumber. They love to send us oil. We like to buy their oil. we like their people to move here. My in-laws are all Canadian Americans now. My daughter-in-law is a Canadian American. They are our closest friends, physically and emotionally. They're basically fellow countrymen. But they run a rigged game when they want to. And Donald Trump's calling them on it.
Well, that's certainly one way to look at it. The way they look at it is that the North American Free Trade Agreement was renegotiated at Trump's behest, the USMCA, United States, Mexico, Canada Trade Agreement, and that the president has, been either going outside of that agreement, breaking it, or threatening to break it. All of these things are always up for negotiation. Sometimes with certain negotiating partners, the stick works. Sometimes with certain negotiating partners, the carrot or the honey works. And I think it's just a matter of trying to decide, do you want to successfully renegotiate trade terms? And then what's the best way to get there?
The one thing I don't know, and it has not come up, the part of the USMCA renegotiation in Trump 1 was Keystone. And Keystone was going to pump a lot of oil in. There were going to be a lot of jobs in America. It was going to be a great thing. Biden comes in, he shuts it down. Canada says, enough of that. We're not going to play this game. They shut it down too. So it's not the same deal that it's a fundamental material change in terms when the oil's not coming in through Keystone. Any buzz about that at all?
It's funny. I was talking to somebody up in Alberta, but the concern was that the oil exports generally could get caught up into this. And of course, the U.S. Of our imports, we import more oil from Canada than anywhere else in the world. And we have refineries in the upper Midwest that are only built to refine Canadian crude. They can't refine American crude or Mexican crude. So this is really a huge deal in terms of what happens here. I think the other thing that we need to mention here, Hugh, is it may seem like a funny joke to us where Trump's just doing his thing about Canada becoming the 51st state. They're really taking it personally. And it is probably, if the Liberal Party holds on to the,
let me throw a flag.
Prime Minister,
let me throw a flag. This is Liberal Party. There's my flag. 15 yards for spouting Liberal Party propaganda. Pierre Poilievre's 9 points ahead. They're trying to make this an issue. It ain't going to work.
They were dead and buried.
Well, they Justin Trudeau, who was dead and buried.
Well, they now listen, Hugh. All I'm going to tell you is, because you asked me, and I've been talking to them, and it's something that they take extremely personally, and they've taken it personal enough that it's given the Liberal Party a chance to hold on in what we assume will be upcoming elections. It doesn't mean they will, but they had zero chance before all of this, and it's just
I get it, David. I know what they're telling you.
That even the conservatives in Canada take personally.
I watched the Pierre's ad where he had to say, "I'll be tough on Mr. Trump," but I know that all they've done is try and switch the attention away from Justin Trudeau, the fabulously failed faker, to Donald Trump, who's fabulously successful president, and make him the issue and not Trudeau. But the Canadians are pretty smart people. If they pull that ticket for the socialists again and the liberals, as opposed to Pierre, they're out of their minds. They'll end up with more. And they don't even pull their weight on the NORAD anymore. They are really becoming like the cousin who calls up and asks for cash all the time.
That may be true, and I'm not arguing any of these points with you, but I am telling you, I've covered voters. Emotion plays a huge role in how people vote. Pride plays a huge role in how people vote, and this is a very big deal in Canada. That's all I'm saying.
Oh, I hear you, and keep me posted on what the Canadians are up to. I liked Rocky and Bullwinkle. I liked the Mounties. I always have. I don't watch that horrific show that my friend Brian Baird does about the Canadian Mountie, Call of the Heart. Have you heard of that? That's the worst show on TV.
I don't watch it. Listen, we have the best TV. All of their people come here to produce better TV. So,
well, Brian's making bank on it, so somebody's watching it. But I'll tell you, it's not great. Thank you so much, David Drucker. Let me check the markets after the trade deal stuff this morning, brought to you by American Federal. If you're buying or selling gold, 1-800-221-7694. Do it with Nick Gorovich. Dow is now down about 0.76. The S&P off 0.3. NASDAQ's actually up 0.41. Gold is up to $2,927 an ounce. And so when, markets figured out, this is kind of a joke. And as I said on Dana and Bill this morning, I don't pay attention to traders who get the vapors because Trump's playing a long game, trying to reshore a bunch of American production. But in the meantime, gold is your hedge against everything. And if you're buying gold, do it with American Federal because you can trust Nick Brovich. Transparent as transparent can be. 1-800-221-7694. That's 1-800-221-7694. 1-800-221-7694. Talk to American Federal to buy or sell gold. Wanted to check on the 10-year Treasury with our friends, andrewandtodd.com. And the 10-year Treasury went down today to 4.2%. So I got to think you're in the mid-sixes now. And interest rates will come down further when they pass tax relief. But don't wait for that. Call Andrew and Todd today, 888-888-1172. They're with Sierra Pacific Mortgage. They are lenders. They lend you the money that you need to buy a house, no matter you're moving east to west, north to south, wherever you're going down the block or around town. If you're moving and you need to buy a new place or sell the old place or both, talk to Andrew Del Rey and Todd Avakian. They've been doing this for 40 years, more than 40 years combined. I think it's over 50 years now. They're getting old, guys, but they're still good. And they open up a file, and they just keep track of where you are and where interest rates are. And every time you can save money by refinancing, they will refinance your house. Interest rates have begun to come down. That is a great thing. Call andrewandtodd.com. Go to their website, andrewandtodd.com, or call them at 888-888-1172. And let me also say thanks to all of you who stepped up. I'm going to keep after you for Food for the Poor. $100 feeds a child for a year in El Salvador. El Salvador is doing everything right. It's a great place to put your relief charity work to work through Food for the Poor, which has been doing this for decades. They know how to get rice and beans and vitamins and all the kind of stuff that keeps kids growing and learning in El Salvador, not on the move north, not on the move south, not running away from drug gangs, but in school, learning, growing, healthy. Food for the Poor works, and they've been doing it for a long, long time, and you can trust them. I want to thank all of you who are stepping up for $100, $300 for 3 kids for a year, $505. Figure that out, Steelers fans. I shouldn't be making fun of you. We're the ones that traded for Kenny Pickett yesterday. I want you. If you feel bad for the Browns getting Kenny Pickett, then make a donation to Food for the Poor right now. That ought to move you, Carl, you cheapskate, for $100 for El Salvador. Go to the feed them at topofhughhewitt.com. My guest is Bret Baier. He is host of Special Report, which you'll watch tonight at 6 p.m. on the Fox News Channel. And I have no idea what you and your producers are going to figure out, Bret, because you could lead with tariffs, you could lead with Mahmoud Khalil, you could go with the Ukraine talk, Secretary Rubio and National Security Advisor Waltz coming out and saying that ceasefire has been offered by Ukraine. What are you going to go with?
Hey, you. We still have some time. A lot can happen. Actually, I think that the president's speech to the Business Roundtable is probably going to be newsworthy. He's already said some things that reflect about the economy, Canada backing off the threat of cutting electricity to some of those northern states. That was a big development today. And as you mentioned, the Ukraine developments in Saudi Arabia. My guess at this hour will probably be a double lead between the economy and the Ukraine developments, and we've got reporters on both.
Now, Bret, I began the day with Dana and Bill, and they threw up the early market. Then the market panicked at the open because of Rob Ford threatening to turn off the lights in Minnesota and New York. I said, I really don't pay any attention to this. If they pass the tax bill and get the extension done and they cut some stuff and they get back to the Trump economy of year 3 of term 1 by year 3 of term 2, even if there's a recession in between, I don't think you have to come to that, he'll be just fine and the country will be cooking and he'll have reshored some things. I think he's playing the long game and doesn't give a lick about a day up and a day down. What do you think?
I agree with you. I do think that there are some political strategists on the right who think pushing for the taxes as part of a bill first and like putting a lot of energy there before the reciprocal tariffs may have been a better progress, as far as what goes first. But I agree with you. He is playing the long game. He is talking much more about the economy overall in the long term, bringing companies back, bringing jobs back, and selling that is just you have to sell it in the middle of a very volatile market, and that does happen.
I had Admiral Mark Montgomery on yesterday, retired two-star, just come back from Taiwan, and he made this point to me, which I hadn't really figured out, that the president of Taiwan, the vice president of Taiwan, and the secretary of defense of Taiwan cannot come to the United States without an international incident. But the chairman of Taiwan Semiconductors not only can come, he can come and put $100 billion into our country to build chips here. I missed the story entirely. That's a big deal, Brett. That's what I think the president's really playing for, is car companies, chip companies, and steel companies.
Yeah, I agree with you. And it has happened. I mean, they have trickled in, and each one of these world leaders that comes to talk to him comes with some other, investment or companies that are part of their country bringing, a lot of business this way. So if you add all of that up, it starts to be real money over time. And in addition to Doge and taking out waste, fraud, and abuse, I think they're adding up what they think will be a launch pad for taxes. When that actually gets through, that'll supercharge the economy. It's just a matter of getting there and convincing people to hold on if it's a little bumpy ride.
And letting Doug Burgum and Chris Wright turn the energy spigots on and get the small modular reactors built while regulations get cut. And it can't happen in a hurry, but it's happening pretty fast. Let's turn to the big story. I made the argument today that Khalil, the green card holder, he's an LPR, a legal permanent resident. He has all the protections of citizenship, except we can send you home for a variety of reasons. One, if you break the law. Number two, and this is what I think is going to happen, if the Secretary of State makes the determination that it is reasonable to conclude you're a damage to our national security and our foreign policy, we can give you the boot. It's actually, I don't know how you have a reviewable standard there. I think you have to defer to the Secretary of State. There's no standard of review set up in the statute. So I think Mr. Khalil is gone. But you've probably had a chance to talk to Jonathan or Andy in person. What are you hearing about the Khalil case?
Yeah, I think the statute's pretty clear. I mean, there is a lot of leeway in discretion of the Secretary of State. And so they can make the, one-to-one supporting Hamas, calling for violence, or supporting Hamas terrorist activities to some end as being a detriment to U.S. national security. It's not a clear First Amendment case. I think it does have legal backing to make this move. That's not to say it doesn't cause controversy in ACLU corners.
I am surprised, though. I'm not surprised that Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar took to X. I am surprised that Senate Democrats posted support for free Khalil. And it's like, give them an 80-20 issue and they'll go for the 20 every time, Brett. And I don't know how they're going to break out of their cycle of the slow of despond until they figure out that there's some common sense things, like people paying $75,000 a year for a kid to go to Columbia want the classes to actually happen. And they don't like supporting Hamas, which has held Idan Alexander now for 17 months. He's an American citizen.
Right. I mean, it's kind of cut and dry, one would think. And it's, it could be a 90-10 issue. When you read the posts of the rabbi on Columbia University saying to Jewish kids, do not show up here because it's too violent, that's a moment. And I think that most parents, most people who are paying for the tuition, there's not a thought about what that's going to result in as far as this guy getting kicked out. I think, listen, it's an interesting case. It's nuanced. The administration is taking an action that, even for them, is a bold action, but they're doing it.
And they're sending a message. I'm glad they went for the person with the most protection, not for the student visa. It's easier to throw out someone with a student visa. Violate the terms of the visa, you're gone. But an LPR, a green card holder, that's a legal permanent resident. And they're not easy to expel, but it is an unreviewable decision. And I don't believe the Supreme Court will back away from that. Brett, let me ask you, because you're getting up to the time when you have to decide whether you want your kid to go to Big State U or Ivy or go down the street where they're happy. Does the campus unrest come into your mind when you help think about advising your kids about where to go to college?
I leave that to him. Paul is my oldest. He's 17. We've started the tours, and we've been on some campuses that had some protests. But he asked the questions when we took the tours. And, he has a level head on his shoulders. Do I think I would say to him, go someplace where this is happening all the time? I would probably look other places, which is why you're seeing this real resurgence of schools in the South that haven't had a lot of this issue. You're seeing a lot tougher admissions for places that have a different perspective.
I think young people want to go to college to go to class and have a college experience, and that's why they should go to the Ohio State University. Is Paul visiting Buckeye Land?
He's not. But who knows?
Oh.
Who knows? I could maybe get him interested. I'll get you on the phone with him.
Well, they got the Scarlet and the Gray course. They're better than the Blue and the Gold course, which are always covered with snow.
I've played it. It's a great course.
So I'm telling you, make him into a Buckeye. He'll be happy. He'll have the Natty to start. He'll get 4 more. It'll be great. Bret Baier will be watching tonight at 6 p.m. Thank you for joining me as always. A pleasure to talk to you. Bret runs a fun show, and it's always where everyone goes. Every newsmaker in America goes there. Let me tell you about one of our sponsors, Job Creators Network. They are running educationfreedomusa.com. Educationfreedomusa.com. That's where the school choice movement collects all the data. Who's got what? Who's leading the pack? The best school choice in America is in Arizona. It is a universal school choice. $7,500 voucher. Take it wherever you want to go. God bless Doug Ducey and the legislators of Arizona, because it's going to change the lives of every kid in that state. They are the opposite of Randy Weingarten. They care about the kids, and Randy Weingarten cares about our union, not the kids. And that's why we need educationfreedomusa.com. We need every parent to see what they could have in their state if they get organized. Job Creator Network is taking the lead on this. I'll talk to Alfredo Ortiz about it. I want you to please go and look it up yourself and join it. educationfreedomusa.com. educationfreedomusa.com. Also want to remind you, our friend Dennis Prager is still out there. Pragertopia is kicking around. He's making his comeback. Give a listen to Prager.
My older son is in from Florida. When he was a little kid, he'd come to my night show that I did in Los Angeles and often would sleep during the show. David, welcome. It is a joy to have you.
Thank you. And I think that since that time, I've had to have radio or television or something on while I fell asleep. And I always wondered why.
I got to say, that makes me laugh. I've known Dennis Prager since 1989 when we both did weekend shows on Sunday night. And we're still friends. And his recovery accelerates. But if you're missing him, go join Pragertopia. You don't have to miss him for a single day. Pragertopia, available at pragertopia.com. I've told you many times I begin my day with the Commentary Podcast, and my guest, John Podhoretz, is his host. I'm looking at a video of him right now. He's wearing a nice blue golf shirt. I think it's from Monday's podcast because Matt Continetti's on it, and I doubt that today's is up there yet. Hello, John. How are you?
I am well. So I see you have some fun trinkets, and I think you should point out to people that behind me, you can see an Engelbert Humperdinck album, an Elvis album, an Eddie Fisher album, an Al Jolson
You know way
album.
too much about Eddie Fisher. I was kind of struck by how much you knew about Eddie Fisher.
Hugh, we're both too young to know anything about Eddie Fisher.
I know.
But yet, here we are.
Here we are. All right, here's where I am. I was listening to you yesterday. I was so profoundly upset by Matt Continetti's observation. You were talking about the rise of anti-Semitism in America in the culture. I believe a good way to step on that is, in fact, for Israel to finish the war in Gaza. And I understand Christine's objection, but Matt made the comment, they don't know anything and they don't trust anyone. And I thought to myself, actually, they know Donald Trump and they kind of trust him, which is good because Trump is the best friend that Israel's had behind the Resolute desk since Richard Nixon during the Yom Kippur War in 1973. And then it occurred to me, John, you know, for 45 months, Israel has a friend in the Oval that they might never, ever have again if the Democrats actually win.
And it is possible. Look, yeah.
So how should they act? Not just Israelis, but American Jewry vis-a-vis Trump, because this is this may be their last guy.
Well, look, I'm not gonna psychoanalyze or diagnose the ills or failings or problems within the American Jewish community, which are way too complicated to get into. But I do believe that Israel's challenge at this moment is this: it's caught between Scylla and Charybdis. Scylla meaning it's got to destroy Hamas and win the war, and it also desperately wants to get the hostages home. And these two tasks are very much at contradictory odds with each other. And you saw over the weekend this stumble-bum effort by this amateur negotiator. I don't really understand where he came from or how on earth he was given this task to negotiate directly with Hamas over the hostages, or particularly over the one surviving American hostage, Alexander, who apparently went and said, "Hey, you can have a bunch of Israeli prisoners, or we can do this, or we'll do that, we'll do the other thing," as though that's the way that this war is going to be won. The Israelis are in an existential nightmare, and Trump has done the best thing that he possibly could, in my view, which is to say, it's up to you. We have your back. If you go in, we have your back. I think, though, that if Bibi is paralyzed and remains paralyzed for weeks, there's a point at which Trump might start getting a little frustrated.
Yeah, the secret to the Spiha. Robert O'Brien is probably my closest friend and special presidential envoy for hostage affairs before he became the national security advisor. That's what this guy's job is. And Spiha is a job that is a special government employee. You don't get paid to do it. And so you put up your hand, you agree to do it. And if you know how to do it, if you're a lawyer who's been around the UN and DOD like O'Brien, you can get a lot of good stuff done. You end up being a national security advisor. But if you're a stumblebum, you can really create havoc, and he did over the weekend. Let's put that aside. I think we're never going to see him again, to tell you the truth, John. I don't think we're going to see him again. I want to focus on the fact that for 45 months, Israel's got someone who's got their back. Don't they have to go after Iran hard? They're going to go after Gaza, but I think that this is their last window, because God forbid that Kamala Harris had won. She would have been worse than Biden, and the next one will be worse than both of them.
Well, two things about that. Number one, the problem for Israel is one of capabilities. So Israel had this remarkable success with American intelligence help and some American air support in destroying the Iranian air defenses last fall. So Iran is denuded of defense. What Israel, it's not clear, has the capability to do is deliver the coup de grace strike that will destroy the Iranian nuclear program. Who has that capability is us. Clearly, Trump does not want to do it. He would prefer, just like every other president, from Bush to Obama to him to Biden, would prefer not to engage militarily with Iran. And in fact, Trump sent a letter last week to Iran saying, let's try to make some kind of a deal, which Iran then scoffed and cursed and was... Yeah,
I laughed out loud when you said all I had to do was send a beautiful letter, like Kim Jong-un and Putin used the right words, but Khamenei is such a fanatic, he wouldn't even do that.
Right. Okay, so here's my point is, like, Israel has this unparalleled opportunity, but it may not really have the ability to do the strike itself. So the question is, can an Israeli success against Hamas, like the real delivering the final end, a real Western victory, unvarnished Western victory against a terrorist army, control of this territory and all of that, will that make it more comfortable for Trump to join Israel in at least providing the backup support that Israel would need in terms of, like, refueling and air and stuff like that maybe, and some of the weapons that I think Israel does not yet have.
I think it's a good deal for Bibi or whomever follows Bibi to make the argument. Israel is actually America's best ally. It's its most innovative ally. Witness the Lebanon operations. It's its most powerful ally, at least the equal of the other nuclear powers that are clearly on Team America's side. It's a fighting people. They know how to win. They do win when they have to win. But they're not the little brother anymore. I think there's Japan, there's Australia. They're not nuclear powers. There's Taiwan. It's more of a liability than it is a power. Israel's our best ally. They're not paralyzed like Europe. They're our people. They can make demands on us, can't they?
Well, I don't know if they even need to make demands. I think yes, having a friend in the White House is very important, and it's so emotionally important to Israelis that they were paralyzed when Biden spent 6 weeks being Israel's friend at the beginning of the war and then took his turn away, right? And they were so happy. They were so happy to have a friend that they were like, we got to keep him in our corner. We got to keep him in our corner. And pretty much from December of 23 onward, Biden and the Biden administration was really no longer in Israel's corner. I wouldn't say it was in Hamas's corner, but it wasn't in Israel's corner. What's happening now is Trump has given them the green light. They've got to do it. The problem that they face is this national hunger to get these hostages, 80 hostages home and the bodies home. And I don't know. I mean, I this is a very, very difficult thing to say, but those lives as against the 9 million lives of Israel's population.
And the 400 IDF soldiers who've died there. 400 IDF soldiers died in Gaza. John, I disagree with the gang this morning because I thought you sounded skeptical about the action towards Mahmoud Khalil. Now, I'd done my work, and Andy McCarthy had helped me with it, and I'd learned about 8 U.S.C. 1227. It is up to the Secretary of State to make a finding that a legal green card holder, a permanent legal resident, the highest amount of protection short of actual citizenship, can nevertheless get booted out if the Secretary of State has reasonable ground to believe potentially serious adverse foreign policy consequences from the United States occur if that individual state. It's an unreviewable finding. He's going to get his ass booted out of this country. And I think it's a great move by Team Trump because they went to the top of the food chain, a green card holder, and said, you're gone. The student visa people got to be said, whoa. So I just was underwhelmed by your guys' support for the president's action.
Oh, so I am wildly supportive of the president's action. I think it's clear that what happened on Thursday night was that ICE was unprepared for the complication of the claim, and I'm saying claim now. It's probably true, but we don't have independent verification of the fact that that Mahmoud Khalil is a green card holder. His lawyer.
I'm hoping he is. I'm hoping they picked the toughest target.
Okay, so Caroline Leavitt, the press secretary, said today that he is being booted out because he is a promoter of literature and ideas that say that a terrorist organization, in support of a terrorist organization, and that's enough, according to the statute you cited, for him to be booted out. I'm fine with that. I do believe that had he been a student visa holder, they could have done it in 3 hours without
He'd be gone. He'd be gone.
Right?
Yeah. No, he gets a hearing tomorrow.
So now tomorrow morning he'll be in a courtroom on Center Street in Lower Manhattan. The judge in the case is actually a friend of mine, Jesse Furman.
His wife was a Columbia Law School professor. How can he be on this case? She's not there anymore, thank God. But how can she be on this case?
She's the principal of my kid's school. She hasn't been there for 10 years. She hasn't been there for 10 years. So she is a principal of a Jewish state. So just so people understand, she's a principal of a Jewish state school. These are observant Jews. He is not the sort of person who would be inclined to be warmly disposed toward Mahmoud Khalil. So the question then is, how is he going to view this statute? And judges, you're saying it's an unreviewable finding. He could review it, and then it could go.
He's going to disagree with me, and the Second Circuit's going to disagree with me, and then the Supreme Court's going to agree with me because they've already done this two or three times.
That is one possible scenario. The other scenario is that he'll agree with you.
We'll see. I'm so happy they're doing this, John. What I like the most about yesterday or today, the commentary pods are all great, so they run together. is you're all applauding cutting off the $400 million to Colombia. And somebody said, it might have been you, the way to end anti-Semitism in America is to punish it. Punish it wherever it shows up. Now, I don't have an answer to how to get rid of it. If there weren't Jews, I don't know what the conspiracy business would do. There are only got so many moon landings to explode. But don't you think it eventually runs a course and gets boring because it's nuts?
I wish. No, I think the point is that anti-Semitism is the world's oldest hatred, or the world's oldest kind of like organized or mass hatred, and it's never going to go away. And I think the problem that we face in this country and have faced since October 7th was a conundrum. That is that Jews were victimized on October 7th, 5,000 casualties in a nation of 9 million with these hostages taken. And instead of that generating sympathy, it seemed to generate bloodlust for Jews against Jews. And so the answer, if that's what happens, then obviously the problem is that signs of Jewish weakness or Jewish paralysis or Jewish failure are a way to organize mobs against Jews. And so Jews have to succeed and triumph in order to roll this back. And we need to be feared. So one way that Jews have reestablished some of that on campuses is wealthy Jewish donors to Ivy League schools have been cutting them off to in hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars. That's very big. If the influence of the federal government can be to take these schools and say, you are violating Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, you're done. Goodbye. This is exactly how we would treat you if you were doing this to black people. If you were selectively discriminating against black people or against Hispanics, you can't do it against Jews. You are not getting federal dollars. That is how you choke the institutions. And I
don't know Leo Terrell. I don't know who he is, but he's going to do that to every single institution. It's so clear-cut under Title VI. It's that Jews are both a race and an ethnicity. It's like a double win. It's a three-point shot. You're outside of the arc, and so you win twice. I think it is absolutely the way to go. And also, Matt said, we got to teach that Winston Churchill is a hero. At your kids' Jewish day school, do they teach Winston Churchill as a hero?
Actually, it just so happens that yes, it so happens that they do. But it's not my kids' Jewish day school that is the place that needs these lessons, right? It is the conventional American school that needs to understand that Western civilization is a glory. The Jewish civilization is the fundament from which Western civilization springs, and so you can't have one without the other, and you poison one while you poison the other, and vice versa. And so, combating the 1619 Project has a salutary effect in the war on anti-Semitism. That seems counterintuitive, but it's actually the same.
No, I thought Christine Rosen was right over the target. We've got to repair. Yeah, I teach law students, John. I'll leave it with this. They don't know what the Missouri Compromise of 1820 is. They don't know what the Compromise of 1850 is. They don't know how we got Texas and Arizona and California. They don't know why the Civil War started. They don't know it. They're law students. They can pass the bar. They're smart, but they don't know anything. What's happened in America?
Well, I mean, so we went with this doctrine 40 years ago that what we were supposed to teach were themes rather than facts. And so people are learning sort of doctrines or ideological lines of argument rather than history, which is facts. Like I remember 10th grade, 10 billion years ago, I had a year-long course called American Chronology, my favorite course I ever took in school, which began with 1620, moved on to 1975, and like you went through American history, and yeah, you learned about the Missouri Compromise, you learned about Henry Clay, you learned about Daniel Webster, you learned about Dred Scott, you learned about
Reconstruction, you learned about why Grant was everything,
in order.
And then you did it again at Columbia, right? Or you went to the University of Chicago. You probably had to do it for 8 semesters. You probably had no fun at all.
No
American chronology for 8 years. That's University of
8
Chicago.
years of American chronology. You're getting really getting into the weeds there, right? But
John is a proud University of Chicago graduate, but I am never going there. I'm so glad I didn't go to law school there after I've heard you talk about it. John Podor, it's good to see you. Always keep going. Go and sign up for Commentary Podcast. I listen to it. Some people watch it on YouTube. I listen to it as I drive and as I trundle. Thank you, John. Always good to see you. I'm playing that in the hopes that the electricity is on in Minnesota. They were sweating. There it is. We're playing "Oh Canada" for you, Lilacs. Are you standing up because of that?
Yes, as a matter of fact, you. Of course, I am.
Good. Your lights are on. Rob Ford was threatening to turn your lights, or Doug Ford, I can't remember which Ford did, was going to turn off your lights this morning.
Yeah, so I heard. We were told about that, at which point I thought, one of the things that I do like about living in America is is what we call electricity and the constant access to it. So the idea somehow that we would have it turned off because of the trade dispute was unnerving, but also you have to think, why are we getting our power from Canada exactly?
Well, you've anticipated my question. Why is Minnesota? Haven't you got coal up there? Don't you have dog sleds?
Well, Hugh, you can't exactly power a power plant with dog sleds. I mean, even if you put them
they go fast enough, you can.
In a hamster wheel, I don't think you would be able to move the turbines to generate sufficient stuff. No, we have a nuclear power plant. We have gas and oil and the rest of it. But I'm wondering whether or not we are going to be in the perilous position that many places are when net zero effects start to do things like destroy your ability to flip on the light switch and get your lights right away. But the grid is connected in ways that go beyond the ken of mere guys like us. I mean, we are connected to Texas. Texas is connected to, Alaska, as far as I know.
Don't start doing the jawbones connected to the leg bone on me, because I got important stuff. You are represented by one Ilhan Omar, are you not?
I am.
Yeah. So have you called her yet to suggest that a constituent would like to see Mr. Khalil tossed out of the country?
Yeah, I'm going to get right on that, Hugh. I'm going to get right on that in a second. I was just right after I get done talking to the governor about disconnecting us from the power grid of Canada, and I'm sure that he would be on that in a trice. No, I haven't. What's the point? But it's an interesting martyr to make, isn't it? I mean, this fellow. I found fascinating when they had some pictures of the recent Barnard takeover. Did you see that?
I've seen them all, and I don't need. I need is the fact that Marco Rubio made the finding, and under 8 U.S.C. 1227, he's gone. And that's it.
But
you make a finding that you're detrimental to our national foreign policy, you're gone.
You get it. The poster that they put up had Suleiman. It had the other guy that they recently smoked in Gaza somewhere, and it had a little picture that said "Death to America." Death to America, with only one K, interestingly enough. The photograph was a famous picture of a burning apartment building in Minneapolis that was torched during the riots in 2020. And I took that very personally because that was my city that burned. And I don't even think they know the story of the very picture of the building that they burned. It was a low to medium income house. It was an affordable housing complex that they burned in order to get the point across about America, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So when I see a place that I used to drive by under construction burned, on a poster in New York City protesting the existence of America, I have to admit that a certain amount of sympathy that I might have had drains out that pipe in my ankle and goes right in.
Well, there's a kid named Edon Alexander who is entering into his 17th month as a hostage in the Hamas hellhole. So I have no sympathy to drain. None. Zero. Let me ask you about...
I was reading... Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just reading the biography of the gentleman that they wanted to deport. It was very interesting. He said his family is originally from Tiberias, Palestine. Have you ever heard of Tiberias?
Tiberias is in Israel. Or is that Caesarea?
Yes. Yeah, no, he's talking about, it says Tiberias, Palestine, which has been Israel forever. But I didn't even know until I researched it today, the existence of a town called Tiberias, which is named after the emperor himself. Anyway,
but it was in Israel until, I mean, Palestine didn't get renamed by the Romans until, what, 80 AD?
Well, it was... It's an old place. It was settled mostly by the Jews, and the British kicked the Arabs out before the war, and then after 48 there was the unpleasantness and so forth and so forth.
Nobody knows nothing. I was just talking about this with Podhorts. Nobody knows nothing about nothing, and I really don't. He's worried. The Commentary Podcast guys and gal, Christine Rosen's on there. They're worried that anti-Semitism is back, and I don't think it ever left. It was in the green room for a while. It's just back. Have you noticed it locally?
No, I haven't. What I have noticed is more platforming in a curious way on the right, where it seems to be gone beyond the people who are just asking questions. And there were Jews dancing on 9/11. It's a little bit more prominent, seeping into my Twitter feed, which I absolutely hate. We know it's been on the left in the form of anti-Zionist and the rest of that stuff, but no, it's on the resurgence on both sides, and I absolutely can't stand it. But to be fair, it isn't the Proud Boys and the rest of them who are barging into universities demanding that the Jews be dealt with.
Well, this brings me to my last question. You are a fan of the U. You are a graduate of the U, the University of Minnesota. Did the University of Minnesota have trouble? The Ohio State University had trouble. I couldn't believe it, but they did.
Yeah, they had a little bit of an encampment. They had a little bit of the sit in the provost's office or somewhere and complain, but they didn't have the permanent encampment that they did in Columbia, or the sort of violent rhetoric that you heard. And I think they cleared them out in time for graduation, if I recall correctly.
Do you think the president of your university noted that Columbia lost $400 million yesterday? $400 million?
Million dollar, yes. And Columbia is telling people that, of course, they can't have, they're canceling grants and all the rest of it. They're sitting on something like $18 billion in endowment. And you think they could perhaps dip into it. That seems to be the definition of the rainy day for which you have a rainy day.
You'll hear the next word will be restricted. It will be restricted endowment, because that's the oldest game in town. That's a restricted endowment. That's restricted to what we want to use it for, which is not what the federal government pays for.
Right. The University of Minnesota was one of the DOJ named them as one of the universities that had an anti-Semitism problem. And nobody is scratching their head and trying to exactly quite figure out precisely what it is. And that seems to have gone away. It's not one of the prominent examples, and it mystified people why we made the list.
There is a lawyer.
I'm still there.
There's a lawyer at the DOJ. His name is Leo Terrell. He's got a list, and he's checking it twice. He's going after every university and every federal dollar, and I say bravo. He's going to get both of my alma maters because they were both bad. Harvard and Michigan were both bad.
It's the oddest act for a supposed Nazi-sympathizing fascist regime, isn't it?
Yes.
It's one of those things that makes you scratch your head. If Elon Musk was truly a Nazi, you'd think he'd be quitting the administration now out of general principle.
Well, you know, things are complicated these days, James. And if you'll call your congrwoman and ask her about this, we can get the ball rolling.
Get right on it.
Right?
I'll get right on it.
Lilacs, listen to him in the diner or whatever. Go to lilacs.com, find his podcast, The Dining Room, or The Diner, or something like that. The Dining Room is not actually the name of Lilacs' podcast. It's The Dining Room with Dwayne, hosted by myphdweightloss.com. Have I got that correct?
No, you still don't. The Dining Room is where you talked to James.
myphdweightloss.com is our sponsor. That's where you lost weight. So you did not go to The Dining Room with James.
No, I did not. And I didn't go to the dining room that awful much with my PhD weight loss either.
What 864?
644.
1900. Dwayne lost 50 pounds, kept it off for 2.5 years now. Let me ask you something.
Yeah.
What did they advise about going out to people's houses before dinner?
Honestly, eat a protein bar or eat something ahead of time so you're not as hungry there. You won't eat as much.
But then you push food away if it's not on your program?
Yeah.
You insult the host?
If necessary.
So you have fewer friends after myphdweightloss.com.
Yeah, but but it's the quality, not the quantity.
Well, when you're starting low.
What, with friends?
Yeah.
Well, that's a different kind of therapy.
We can't find you a joy every day.
That's a different kind of therapy.
864-644-1900. Go join myphdweightloss.com. Speaking about food, Food for the Poor is our friend, and they have been our friend for decades. And I want them to be your friend. I want you to contribute to them every March. $100 feeds a child for a year in El Salvador. And they are focused on children's lunches in El Salvador. El Salvador is doing everything right to get off the ground. They've had a president throw all the bad guys in jail. They've busted up the cartels. They've reopened the schools. They're keeping the kids away from the drugs. But they got to feed the kids. And Food for the Poor, you can phone in a gift right now, 855 888-359-4673. You can go find the banner at the top of HughHewitt.com called, excuse me, Feed Their Future. Or just give a listen to Daisy speaking through an interpreter.
Como humanos que somos, les diría que
As humans,
pues nos
I will call out for your help. If you have an opportunity to have a good life with many blessings, but you can actually change the life of a child in a basic need such as food, you then can also be a blessing to people that don't have anything to eat, and they will eat because of you.
And it is so true, and that's why we trust Food for the Poor and why we let them sponsor, and why we have a banner at HughHewitt.com at the top, Feed Their Future. Please be generous. A cross-faded introduction of the music from the Hugh Hewitt Show to the soundtrack from The Commitments, because The Commitments is the closest I could come to The Impatience, which is what I want to rename the National Review, The Editor's Podcast, The Impatience. Rich Lowry is the editor of National Review. Rich, the editors are impatient. You guys, it's been 6 weeks. And you're worried about the stock market and recession. It's been 6 weeks. What's wrong with you people?
Yeah, I take your point. We just think I think the contention with Canada is so unnecessary. There's so much else going on in the world. We have so many people to worry about. Let's not create a crisis with Ottawa unnecessarily.
Well, now let's start with Canada. They should let our milk in. As I understand, the problem with Canada is we buy a lot of timber and oil from them, but they don't buy our milk or dairy product from the upper Northwest in there, and we've got some stuff to do. And I also think the UCMA, when we renegotiated it under Trump 1, had the Keystone Pipeline in. Biden killed it. Canada walked away, and we got to make up for that now. So it's just a negotiation, and typical Trump bluster matched by, who's the guy in Ontario? Rob or Doug? I can't remember which one it is.
Doug Ford. Doug.
They're cut out for each other, aren't they?
There you go. Yeah. So look, all this can be negotiated, and I think should be negotiated in an orderly fashion when the USMCA is up for review next year. But I just don't. The 25%, the threat of 25% tariffs is not just freaking out the Canadians. It is hurting our markets at the margins. So why do that? We can work out dairy and lumber. These are not new issues. They've been negotiated forever. Fine, negotiate them again. But we're deranging Canadian public opinion, Hugh.
Well,
we're not helping.
My daughter-in-law is
Pierre
Canadian. My in-laws are Canadian American. My daughter-in-law is Canadian American. My in-laws are Canadian American. They're the nicest people in the world. And Russ and Aaron, hello. But I'm here to tell you,
they're not deranged.
They're not deranged. They laugh at all this. They do not much care for Justin Trudeau. And all I see this is that the greatest thing to happen to Justin Trudeau's party is Donald Trump. I think Trump is going to pull the rug out from them now. And they're not going to get a bump. And Pierre Poilievre is going to win anyway. But all they got is Trump, right? They're running against Trump the way that Kamala Harris ran against Trump. It's not going to work.
Yeah, I think Pierre probably wins anyway. And it's a little hard to distinguish. There's been a bump for the Liberals. Might be Trudeau stepping aside. Element of it, I think, clearly is Trump. But I just don't think we don't need a sense of crisis with our northern neighbor. They're just plenty
all
of
right.
other
Now,
things going
let me
on.
talk to you about the other two. Trump has gone to 35% on China. I am all for this because there's only one other superpower in the world. They're not our friends. We should not be making stuff that we need for national security there. We should get people to reshore here. I was glad to see Taiwan Semiconductor come here and put $100 billion on the table. What do you make of the 35% on China? That's a national security tariff. I like that.
Yeah, I think China is a national security issue. But again, not to obsess with Canada. But one good effect we had the first time around with Trump is a lot of companies came back to Mexico and Canada because they thought it was a low tariff environment getting into the United States. So yeah, clearly we can't trust China. We're in a Cold War with China. Rebalancing that relationship is really important.
Yeah. Now, let's talk about when do we actually have data on which to judge Trump? He's going to get the continuing resolution. Mike Johnson is going to get that passed today. The Senate's going to have to pass it because the Democrats don't want to have a Schumer shutdown. Then they're going to get the reconciliation of some sort. When is it fair to start judging the economy to be Trump's economy and not Biden's?
I think usually about a year or so in, but the problem with the tariff threats, they've had a discernible effect like very early on in initial weeks. So if there is, it doesn't matter whose fault it is, if there's softness in the economy or we dip into a recession, it's going to be blamed on Trump, fairly or not.
Well, you might not be old enough to remember. We got wiped out in 1982. Bill Bennett was walking around the West Wing. He was the NEH director then, telling people, chin up, we got 2 more years to 84, and then we crushed him in 84. Because, I mean, that's just the tectonic plagues of American politics as you lose the House after 2 years. I'm resigned to that. I just want to get a couple of reconciliations done before then, and then cut regulation, boost energy production, everything will be fine in 4 years for whomever takes over the party. Isn't that the long view?
Yeah, but also, Hugh, I would have done it in reverse order. I'd do the reconciliation and the tax cut and tax reform first, and then kind of claw it back with tariffs, which are a form of tax increase afterwards. And I think that this is part of the reason. And you're right, it might be transitory. I shouldn't use that word, right? They ruined that word during the Biden years. But it might be that the markets are overly freaked out because they think tariffs are coming before the tax cuts, and the tax cuts have been de-emphasized. But I'm with you. I think that will pass. I think the continuing resolution will pass this afternoon. I just think Trump has such sway with these individual members, besides perhaps Thomas Massie, that even though there's zero margin for error in the House after you get past Massie, that Trump will manage to get this stuff through.
I agree. Now, I want to talk about national security tariffs in a different. NATO has not been paying its weight for a long time. For 20 years, we didn't have to worry about superpower competition, and everybody let their muscles atrophy. And one way to get money that we're paying to defend them is with tariffs on the EU. I'm not opposed to that. One way to stop the cartels is to make Mexico know we're going to make them pay unless they stop the cartels. They cost 75,000 lives a year. Canada is different. He's just playing a game with Canada and messing with them. But the other three, I'm all for, Rich. And I think they're not what Charlie's worried about. Charlie, I know, has a theological objection to tariffs. I like national security tariffs because they're not paying their share when it comes to defending ourselves against China, are they?
Yeah, so as you say, all these cases are a little bit different. With Mexico, clearly we want things on migration and in terms of fighting the cartel. I think they've come our way on that, and there still could be more progress there. The Europeans, I'd be happy not to tariff them. I think tariffs are a form of self-harm, but it's absolutely essential that they spend more on defense. And I think we're seeing that, and we are going to see that. So the maximal optimistic case with regard to Europe is getting some decent settlement in Ukraine's not going to be perfect. Ukrainians aren't going to like it. A lot of Ukrainian hawks like me aren't going to like that, but I think that's baked in the cake. And getting Europe to spend more on defense, and then you might be in a stronger place 6 months.
Zelensky put out a tweet less than a half hour ago. During today's talks, the U.S. side proposed taking an even bigger first step, a 30-day full interim ceasefire, not only stopping missile, drone, and bomb attacks, not only in the Black Sea, but on the entire front line. Ukraine is ready to accept this proposal. We see it as a positive step and are ready to do it. Now it is up for the United States to convince Russia to do the same. What do you think? Did Trump pull something off here?
I think, Hugh, this is the play for Ukraine all along. Stay on Trump's good side, which Zelensky didn't do in that meeting. He was an idiot how he conducted himself in that meeting. We spent the last couple weeks trying to recover from that. But make the point, you're the ones who want peace, and get the ball in Russia's court. And I think that's what they've done in Saudi Arabia.
I'm happy about that. Now, when do we judge Trump on foreign policy grounds? Because I also think he's going to hook up. I think Israel's our only great ally, innovative, powerful, confident, nuclear. And I think the B-52 flying around with the F-15 and the F-35 that are Israeli is a sure sign that Tehran's got something to worry about. How long till he pulls the cork on that case of champagne?
Mm-hmm. Well, that remains to be seen. Just on the foreign policy in general, Hugh, I think this is going to be one we're going to have to wait for 4 years to see how it settles out, right? Because the big play here is an attempt to pry Russia from the grips of China and prevent a big block there. Now that's a huge geopolitical play, and we're not going to know in weeks or months how that one turns out. What happens to NATO? What's our geopolitical position generally? Are we just going to a hemispheric retreat, as some people think, which I don't think is
no, I don't think. We have Israel, Japan, Australia, India. We got friends. We got lots of good friends. I'm not worried about. I think the Europeans need to wake up about China. Rich, here's what I want to finish on. Are you doing an emergency pod with McCarthy, the McCarthy report? Because I cheated. I went on Fox this morning. I sounded like I knew what I did. I just read Andy talking about Khalid. I found 8 USC 1227 read up. He's like a cheat sheet before the bar exam. Are you going to get him on to explain everything?
I don't know whether it'll be an emergency, but it's within 2 days we'll have a McCarthy report up on this, and it's a complicated issue, and like a lot of these legal stuff, you need to listen and read Andy to have a well-informed view.
You know why he's such a good lawyer? He will tell you the weakest link in his chain.
Right.
And when a lawyer is confident enough to say, by the way, they're going to argue this, but that's why it doesn't work. Mm-hmm. I think, okay, I've got an expert here who I can trust. I think he showed it. He laid it all out, and I think this guy's going to get tossed. What do you think?
Jump ball. I'll go with you, Hugh, because you've talked me into optimism and patience.
Andy talked me into optimism. Rich Lowry, he is the lead singer on The Impatience, and he's also the host of The Editors at National Review Podcast. Like and subscribe it, and like and subscribe The McCarthy Report, which Rich also hosts. Thank you, Rich Lowry. Alex Gray was the chief of staff at the National Security Council under President Donald Trump during the first Trump term. He is now the CEO of American Global Strategies. Alex, welcome back. What do you make of developments in Saudi Arabia today with National Security Advisor Waltz, Secretary Rubio, and the tweet from President Zelensky saying, we're in if Russia goes for it?
Sorry about that, Hugh. I missed the first part of the question with an audio issue.
Oh, okay. The setup was Waltz and Rubio said, we got a lot done, and then a half hour ago, Zelensky put out the tweet that we're in for 30 days, ceasefire in place across all domains on the current border if you can get Russia to buy in. Good news, bad news, no news?
I think it's great news. I think we keep forgetting in this conversation is what the fundamental American interest is. It's not affirming the international liberal order. It's not about making a moral stand against what is unquestionably Putin's horrible, vicious regime. The fundamental U.S. interest is finding a solution here that allows the United States to truly pivot to the Indo-Pacific, like we said we were going to do since Hillary Clinton in 2010, 2011. It's time to do it. And we cannot continue to provide resources for the Zelensky regime, which does not have a plan for how it's going to get to a suitable outcome. And as much as we are all united in our opposition to Putin's behavior and his aggression, we have to have a really hard-nosed, narrow definition of U.S. fundamental interests. And I think if we take that approach, which is what the president's doing, that's going to lead us to coming up with a solution that allows the United States to devote limited resources to the greatest threat we've ever faced, the Chinese Communist Party.
Now, Alex Gray, I am a big believer that the president's 35% tariff on Chinese goods is essential to American national security, and that's a response to China's grand strategy vis-a-vis us. What do you think of the 35% tariff on Chinese goods, which they're matching on our goods? But I don't care.
Well, look, Hugh, my old boss, Peter Navarro, used to say, the issue we have here is if we're going to ever have a trading order that works for the United States, that brings back the type of industrialized manufacturing jobs that have been, Ohio, where you're from, Oklahoma, where I'm from, have been decimated over the last couple of decades. We're ever going to get back to that for both economic security and national security purposes. The reality is we're going to have to pay a little bit more for cheap Chinese goods. And in the short term, that may be painful. The reality is that is what that's essential for our long-term health as a nation and for the health of our national security industrial base. And I think it's something that, the president's going to have to, at some point, be very open with people. 35% may even be too low. We need to be very open about what he's trying to do. It's a historic transformation of the U.S. trading system and the trading relationship with our key trading partner, China. And I think it's worth every extra cent.
It is part one of our grand strategy, which is to make sure that we make in the United States that which we need in the United States for our national security. Part two is that we make hard power again. Do you think the continuing resolution, which is on the floor right now, and I assume will pass, plus the reconciliation budget, take the steps necessary to move us in that direction on hard power?
Well, we're not going to be able to truly move in the direction of hard power until President Trump's had the opportunity to put together the type of defense budget that I think he wants to. But where we are right now is, we've gotten an agreement that would allow some increase in the defense spending above, some slight increase to keep up with inflation and some immediate threats that DoD has identified. Do I want a CR? Of course not. Does anyone want a CR? Does the president want a CR? Of course not. But that's the situation, the political reality that we're in with this extraordinarily, historically narrow House Republican majority. And I think we can't let the government shut down. We can't have Republicans get blamed for it. In the interim, let's do the CR, and then let's allow the president to come up with a really impressive Reagan-esque budget that moves us in the direction we need to go in to truly rebuild our defense capabilities.
Now, Chairman Calvert was on, the head of the Appropriations Subcommittee of the House Appropriations Committee for Defense. And he said the 8% reprogramming that Pete Hegseth is doing is in support of the president's priorities. Do you like the way that Secretary Hegseth is going with the 8% reprogram?
It's funny, Hugh. I actually think the most revealing thing about the Secretary's revisions are when you look at the exempted programs. So you look at the roughly 20 programs that he did not put on the chopping block, and they're exactly the programs that need to be excluded, right? They're the key Indo-Pacific deterrence programs that will help us deter and, if necessary, win a conflict with the Chinese Communist Party. We have to continue hardening our bases in the Indo-Pacific. We have to continue with Virginia-class submarines, get up to three a year. We have to continue with the type of missile defenses that are necessary both in the Pacific and for the homeland. Those are the things that Secretary Hegseth exempted.
He did not mention the Columbia class. Was that just a slip of the tongue, do you think?
I was curious about that as well. And obviously, I hope that ultimately they're going to protect the Columbia class. As you know better than anyone, Hugh, the Columbia class is absolutely essential for having our nuclear deterrent, our undersea nuclear deterrent for the rest of the 21st century. So I hope that ends up not being spared the axe.
Yeah, I just can't imagine, because the Ohio class runs out of gas. No, they're greatest ships ever made, but they run out of gas in, 10 years?
They're coming up well on their lifespan. Some of these were built in the 70s, late 70s. It's time to refurbish them. The Columbia class is 100% necessary. I would sincerely hope that we see those come into full production quickly.
All right, Alex, great to talk to you as always. We look forward for more updates as the Ukrainian-Russian negotiations continue. Thank you. Stop by HughHewitt.com. Find the Food for the Poor banner at the top. Feed their future, it says. $100 feeds a kid in El Salvador for 1 year. Can you do that? Most of you do. March is a funny time to run this, but I've been doing it in March for 25 years because I love Food for the Poor. Food for the Poor knows how to deliver rice, beans, vitamins. They do through churches. They started out with a bunch of Catholic priests. They added a bunch of Protestant pastors. They've now expanded to clergy throughout the country. They really put kids into school. They feed them into school. They keep them out of gangs. They let them grow up, stay there, work, thrive in El Salvador. Food for their future. The banner's at HughHewitt.com. Please be generous as much as you can. Every $100 is another kid. That means $1,000, you people in Pittsburgh. That's 10 children. Think about it. Donald Trump talking to the Business Roundtable. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Let's listen in for a moment on what he has to say about the business environment in the United States.
A lot of investment coming into our country, much more than I've ever seen. Apple is investing $500 billion. IBM was with us yesterday, and they're investing a lot. Just companies all over. I could name them. You've read most of them, many of them. But hundreds of billions of dollars is being invested. That wouldn't have happened if I didn't win the election, number one. And I think, number two, the tariffs are having a tremendously positive impact. They will have, and they are having. We have car companies that are not building in Mexico now. They're building in the United States. Some of them, the plants were already started, and they stopped construction, and now they're going to build in the United States. It was very unfair. They'd build in Mexico and sell them across the border with no tax, no nothing. They'd take away our jobs. They'd close up places in Michigan and all over the country, and they'd build them in Mexico. In many cases, they were owned by China. Built in Mexico, owned by China. And that's all stopped now. They're all coming here. Honda
Should
building
be.
a massive.
Lordstown, Ohio, I'd like to recommend to everyone. They're a great big plant there, still in great shape. GM shuttered it after they took the bailout money because they screwed everyone. Trump wasn't president then. Called him up, tried again, reversed it, didn't work. But he's going to make this stick. It's a long game. I know some people hate tariffs, but this is about reindustrialization because we got a superpower problem on our hands called China, and we got to reshore production of critical industries and critical components. Meanwhile, Secretary Rubio, National Security Advisor Waltz, were making progress in Saudi Arabia with the Ukraine delegation, cut number 10.
Well, we're going to take the offer to them. We're going to tell them this is what's on the table. Ukraine is ready to stop shooting and start talking. And now it'll be up to them to say yes or no. I hope they're going to say yes. And if they do, then I think we made great progress. If they say no, then we'll unfortunately know what the impediment is to peace here. But the president's been abundantly clear. He wants the shooting to stop. He wants the warfare to stop. He wants the dying and the suffering to stop. And he believes, and rightfully so, that the only way to end this war is to negotiate an end to it. And we think that it's always easier to negotiate an end to the war when people aren't shooting at each other. That's how the president believes. That's what we hope to achieve. The Ukrainians today have expressed their willingness and readiness to do so immediately. We hope the Russians' answer to that will also be yes.
But no deadline set.
I want to read to you President
Well, the deadline is we hope to do this as soon as possible.
During today's talks, the U.S. side proposed taking an even bigger first step, a 30-day full interim ceasefire, not only stopping missile, drone, and bomb attacks, not only in the Black Sea, but also along the entire front line. Ukraine, writes Zelensky on X, is ready to accept this proposal. We see it as a positive step and are ready to take it. Now it is up to the United States to convince Russia to do the same. If Russia agrees, the ceasefire will take effect immediately. Here's some more of Secretary Rubio and National Security Advisor Waltz, cut number 11.
Well, let me answer the second or the third. You had two, and then I'll let the security advisor talk about the defense and security assistance. On the second question, well, let me answer first on the minerals deal. As part of our communication today, that is something that was negotiated through our Treasury and his counterpart on the Ukrainian side. And so the president, and you see that expressed, both presidents will instruct the appropriate members of our governments to bring to finality the signature of the deal and the signature of this agreement. So that was communicated today, and that's going to happen. That was not the subject of our talks today. I thought I expressed that on our way in. We were here in pursuit of peace. That doesn't mean the minerals deal is not very important. It most certainly is, and we expressed that today in the statements we put out jointly, that the president, our respective presidents, have instructed the appropriate members of their governments to bring this to finality and to conclusion. The second part of your question was?
Does the security assistance include?
No, there was one after that.
There we go. Back on track.
Yeah. What's back on track here, hopefully, is peace. That's what matters the most. I know everyone's looking for who likes this is serious stuff. Okay, this is not Mean Girls. This is not some episode of some television show. This is very serious. Today people will die in this war. They died yesterday, and sadly, unless there's a ceasefire tonight, they'll die tomorrow. The president wants that to stop. That's what he's interested in here. That's why we came here. That's why we're grateful for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia hosting us here. And what we leave here with today is a commitment that the Ukrainians are ready to stop fighting. They're ready to stop the shooting so that they can get to the table and bring about peace for their country and for the world on the security.
Well, I just can't echo enough. President Trump's president of peace. That's what he's demanding, and he's willing to take tough measures on all sides to drive that home. And in terms of the security assistance, it's the current Presidential Drawdown Authority. I'll refer to the Defense Department on the eaches of what munition was where in the process, but it's the current PDA that will proceed to the Ukrainians.
So it's all good news. Now, is Putin pulling a fast one? Donald Trump doesn't like that, and so Vladimir Putin knows that. He also knows he's not going to win. He can't lose. He can be bled. He's bled a lot. But is Putin going to take the opportunity to walk away and declare victory, and Zelensky do the same? Well, I hope so. The House is underway voting for the continuing resolution, which has got to pass. More on Tom Massey is not going to vote for it, but I think every other Republican is going to. I listened to Speaker Johnson this morning before I joined Dana and Bill on America's Newsroom, and he was very confident. Not the kind of statement you give if you're going to lose. House is going to pass this with their one vote to spare for the moron Massey. And that's great news. In the meantime, we've got a little bit of what I was talking with Dana and Bill about this morning. Rashida Tlaib was on in tape right before me. That's a wonderful setup. Cut number 5.
He has been very vocal against the genocide of the Palestinian people in Gaza. And they're targeting him and refusing him constitutional rights. Who's next?
How do you think about this case?
I start with the fact that there are 12 million legal permanent residents in the United States, green card holders, LPRs. He's one of those 12 million. They have a lot of rights, but they are not American citizens. They can be deported. One provisional law, which is 8 U.S.C. 1227, provides that if your presence in the United States does potentially serious damage to our national security, the Secretary of State can make that finding and out you go. Secretary of State Rubio made that finding about Mr. Khalil, and so out he will go. He will get a hearing today, I believe, in the New York Southern District, but I don't find how anyone can overrule the Secretary of State making that particular finding. So not surprisingly, Congresswoman Tlaib is wrong on the law, she's wrong on the facts, and she's wrong on the overall scope of what's going on. President Trump also announced on Truth Social yesterday, this is just the first, and I'm glad it's the first, because LPRs have the most rights of any non-citizen in the United States. So it's a warning shot as well to anyone supporting Hamas. And I don't want to forget to mention, Don Alexander is an American citizen now entering his 17th month of being held hostage by the terrorist organization Hamas. There are other grounds to support the deportation of people depending upon their fact pattern, but the Secretary of State only needs to find that it is reasonably likely that you're causing potentially serious damage to national foreign policy, and I think that's pretty easy to make.
Hugh,
it's such a vague standard. I don't know how you can overturn the Secretary of State's announcement on that. I do want to play for you not Mike Johnson. I want to play for you Carolyn Levitt this morning at the White House talking about the CR, which is being voted on at this moment. Cut number 4.
As President Trump made clear during his historic address to Congress, we must finish this job and continue to carry out the largest deportation campaign in American history. And that is why the President fully endorses the continuing resolution that is before Congress and was negotiated by Speaker Johnson. He is encouraging all Republicans to vote yes on this clean CR, which freezes funding at current levels and will prevent the Democrats from getting their long-awaited government shutdown. Voting against this CR will hurt the American people and kill the incredible momentum that President Trump has built over the past 51 days.
So it's been 51 days. He's going to win today. He's going to win the rest of the week. Chuck Schumer can shoot himself in the foot. I never underestimate the ability of Chuck Schumer to shoot himself in the foot. Carolyn Levitt also talked about the Mahmoud Khalil case in New York, cut number 3.
Under the Immigration and Nationality Act, the Secretary of State has the right to revoke a green card or a visa for individuals who serve or are adversarial to the foreign policy and national security interests of the United States of America. And Mahmoud Khalil was an individual who was given the privilege of coming to this country to study at one of our nation's finest universities and colleges.
And I've got Congressman Pat Harrigan joining us from the floor. Oh, I thought you were telling me that Congressman Harrigan. The CR passed as predicted, but my non-producer faked me out. He just totally head faked me into believing that Congressman Harrigan was calling. Can we go back to Carolyn Levitt? Pick her up.
Of that opportunity, of that privilege, by siding with terrorists, Hamas terrorists who have killed innocent men, women, and children. This is an individual who organized group protests that not only disrupted college campus classes and harassed Jewish American students and made them feel unsafe on their own college campus, but also distributed pro-Hamas propaganda, flyers with the logo of Hamas. That is what the behavior and activity that this individual engaged in. And I have those flyers on my desk. They were provided to me by the Department of Homeland Security. I thought about bringing them into this briefing room to share with all of you, but I didn't think it was worth the dignity of this room to bring that pro-Hamas propaganda. But that's what this individual distributed on the campus of Columbia University. And this administration is not going to tolerate individuals having the privilege of studying in our country and then siding with pro-terrorist organizations that have killed Americans. We have a zero tolerance
I'm not sure
policy for
Carolyn Levitt's got this right. My understanding is that Mahmoud Khalil is an LPR, legal permanent resident green card holder. And that doesn't protect him if you are having potentially serious adverse foreign policy consequences for the United States. And I believe supporting Hamas is such a thing. And I don't think you have to have any documents. I don't think Homeland Security has to present anything. It's a finding by the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, over the weekend, posted that, in fact, we're going to not have any patience for people like that. A White House official said the department had found Khalil, the State Department, had found that Khalil had participated in pro-Hamas rallies and distributed flyers. The agency presented the information to Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who personally signed off revoking his legal status. The administration says the arrest was about national security. The arrest of this individual should serve as a deterrent, said Leo Terrell, who leads the Justice Department's Anti-Semitism Task Force. So I want you to understand, it's a very broad standard. We don't have to let you stay. Green card holders have a lot of rights. They cannot be discriminated against in a lot of different ways. But if they're dangerous to the national security of the United States, out they go. That is not something we can't deport citizens, all right? But we can deport green card holders. So if you're here on a green card and you're doing nasty stuff that we don't like that endangers the national security of the United States, out you go. And it should send a chill down the spine of everyone on a student visa or on a green card participating in these demonstrations. Now, if you're an American citizen, you're covered by Brandenburg, meaning that you can say whatever you want, do whatever you want, provided you're not encouraging violence with the present ability of causing that violence, and provided you're complying with the time, place, and manner restrictions appropriate to your demonstration. But that's not this. This is a green card holder, out he goes. I hope the judge agrees tomorrow. I hope the Second Circuit upholds it. If they don't, the Supreme Court will. Some good news for Pope Francis today. He is no longer in imminent danger of death as a result of the respiratory infection that has kept him hospitalized for nearly a month, the longest hospitalization and the gravest threat to his health in his 12-year papacy. The 88-year-old Pope isn't out of the woods yet, according to reports. Doctors are still cautious, have decided to keep him hospitalized for several more days to receive treatment, not to mention a period of rehabilitation he will likely need. So prayers for the health of the Pope have been answered. It's a great reflection during a season of Lent for Catholics that they should be grateful for. And I'm glad most Catholics resisted politicization of illness, and I'm glad about that. If it is Lent for you and you haven't done anything and you forgot to make some kind of action, think about Food for the Poor, because our friends at Food for the Poor will put your donation to good use. It's a sacrifice. You send them $100, you feed a kid for a year. You won't see it. You won't even remember it. You'll do it. You'll give the $100 or the $200 or the $300. Maybe you want to do $500 to take care of 5 children for a year. You won't remember doing it, except throughout the year. Maybe at lunchtime when you sit down for a sandwich, or you go through McDonald's or whatever your favorite drive-through is, you'll think about the fact that somebody's eating in El Salvador today because you sent the money, or 5 kids are sitting down because you sent $500. You can find the banner at HughHewitt.com. It says Feed Their Future. You can't miss it. Top right center of HughHewitt.com. Or you can just text the word, my last name, Hewitt, Hewitt, to 51555. Hewitt, 51555. Just text it. Or if you're old school, you want to call it in, 855-359-4673. 855-359-4673. I always do this during Lent. I always like working with Food for the Poor during Lent because they began with a group of priests in Central America. It's expanded out to the entire Christian community in Central America. They take care of everyone, regardless of religion or non-religion. They take care of kids, primarily. They feed school kids. And I like it when we focus. Sometimes they do disaster relief. They've helped out in Guatemala and Haiti. But I like it when they do the basic blocking and tackling of nutrition in a place like El Salvador, which after decades of torturous rule by monstrous gangs has returned to a civilized society with a strong president and a strong police force, and schools have reopened, and parents aren't afraid to have their kids in the street. And some parents rely on Food for the Poor for the only food their kid gets. And that's you. You're their bridge to some calories. And it's not elaborate. It is nutritious. It is done well. It is done efficiently. It's done because of generous people like you. So thank you. It's a great way to celebrate Lent. Feed Their Future banner at the top of HughHewitt.com.